Hello, welcome to Rob, Ryan, Red. Thank you very much for joining us this week. We've got another special guest for you on today's podcast. Richard Sutcliffe, the Wrexham reporter from The Athletic, joins us to talk all things transfers, the retain list, and what to expect realistically from Wrexham ahead of a historic campaign in the Championship. He's expecting a few more teary goodbyes after we've already said farewell to Fletcher, Howard, and Davis, amongst many others this summer. So yeah, sit back and relax. If you're new around here, please do leave a like and subscribe as always. Massive thank you to podcast sponsors Red 10 People Development for the continued support of the show, and to Wrexham-based band Hypnotic for the music that stings. You know all that. Once again as well, thank you very much to all of you who tuned in last week for our special podcast with Rob, Ryan, and Blake. You might not have missed that one because it was all over our socials. We've been pretty unsufferable, haven't we, if you do follow us on those. But thank you very much to everyone who made that happen, and thank you again to the guys for giving us so much time. We did kind of overstep our mark there. They said we got a certain amount of time, and we pushed it to the limits, as you can tell by Ryan's hasty goodbye at the end there. But they were all very good spirits. Really nice to chat to them. And yeah, we would have loved to have spoken to them for even longer, as you can imagine. But we just wanted to let them talk, really. I know we kind of took a back seat with that podcast, but you get enough of those over the course of the year. So thank you to Rob and Ryan for making that happen. And thank you to you, as always, for tuning in. Like we said, if you're new around here, please leave a like and subscribe. We'll get on with the show now. Richard Sutcliffe from The Athletic, talking all things Wrexham.
Rob, Ryan, Red.
So, Sooty, we did it. Last time we had you on the podcast, we were umming and ahhing. Would Wrexham get over the line? They did it in the end. Promotion to the Championship. The promised land for so many of us. Something most Wrexham fans, of a certain vintage certainly won't have experienced anyway. Might not have been going to the matches. What's the buzz like been for you around the club? How excited is everyone for this uncharted territory, really?
Oh, very. Obviously the dust has settled now. What are we? We're nearly at the end of May, and it all happened sort of the last week in April. But there's still that buzz. I spoke to Phil Parkinson a couple of days ago, and obviously he's very big on saying to the staff, look, if you don't have to be in, don't come in, because the season's a long season. They'll be back end of June. So he says if people can do stuff, work from home in any way, do so, which he's been doing, because obviously it's a different dynamic for him at the moment. But he has been in the club, and you can sense he's excited. There's a lot of hard work ahead. Obviously, particularly for the club as well, because there's everything going on with the pitch, the cop, getting ready for Championship football. But what a great feeling and I think it'll last all summer. The fixtures are out 26th of June, I think it is. That's when it always becomes real. It's fine getting to the end of the playoffs and things like that, but when you suddenly see all these clubs that Wrexham haven't played in a generation, or maybe not even at all in the league. That's when I think the buzz will really kick in for people.
And it turns out then Parky has turned his phone on since that Vegas trip. Then the players are all back. Not lost anyone though.
Nobody missing in action, as far as I'm aware.
Okay, as far as that's good.
But a very good time had by all, I think, is the best description.
Parky, of course, went off to Dubai for a golfing trip. Which what park would you be in? So would you be wanting Vegas, or would you want Dubai golf?
I've never been to Dubai. I've been to Vegas, and I'm glad I've been, but I wouldn't go back. And Dubai, I've never really fancied. So if anybody wants to give me a promotion bonus, I'll go to Scarborough. I think that'll do for me. And then
easily pleased,
it's my happy place.
Yeah, if only Rob McElhenney had promised a trip to Scarborough to the players that got promoted, maybe they would have got over the line if that was the carrot dangling over the end of the stick. You mentioned there, though, Championship, some massive bloody ties coming up, and when those fixtures drop, it'll be exciting. And, I think Wrexham are the only team next season in the Championship who have never played in the Premier League or the First Division equivalent. So maybe we are underdogs after all. Like you said, when those fixtures drop, that is when it becomes so real for all of us. And we start planning those away days, start envisaging these former Premier League players coming to the Kairos. Is there any game in particular you're really looking forward to covering from sort of a journalistic point of view or visiting? I mean, we all wanted Leeds in a way. We've obviously never played Leeds in a competitive fixture before. But just missed out, sadly, from our point of view.
I won't say sadly as a Leeds fan, so I'm glad we got out of that division. It's difficult, really. There's some great places to go. Sunderland going up, that would have been a great one, but obviously they've gone. Everyone's been to Sheffield United over the last couple of years. I always enjoy going there. Hillsborough's a great old club, great old stadium. Sheffield Wednesday's a great old club. Hillsborough, obviously, an old stadium. One of the grand old venues sort of thing. Obviously, with there's so many. Southampton, Leicester. It's going to be fantastic. You're going to look through and there's so many games that you think, oh, that's not on a Tuesday, because you want as many people as possible to enjoy it. But obviously, because there's that many more midweek games next season as well, that some are going to be on a Tuesday. It's going to be a shame. But Swansea, all of a sudden, the Cardiff not even there, which is that's the big thing missing for me, because I do enjoy my weekends in Cardiff. There's so many, it's you don't want to hark back and say you're not going to the Crawleys and etc. of this world, but it really is now. They're on Wrexham are on a proper stage, and that's it's going to be fantastic whatever happens on the pitch.
Well, on that, I suppose we won't be going to Leyton Orient next season. The playoff final was at the weekend, of course. Congratulations to Nathan Jones? He's joining us at the circus once again, at least.
I said he was going to join us there. Now I thought, oh great, this could be interesting. No.
Welcome to you next year. Robin Ryan wasn't enough for some people, is Nathan Jones?
Yeah, I've noticed the after the Lord Mayor's show getting me on the week after. So that's.
Oh yeah, we need to come down, don't we? For
that's a hospital pass if ever I've received one. So, but
you're the hangover cure, Sooty. That's how we view it.
Yeah.
What do you make of sort of that lineup now for next season? Because obviously this is the first podcast since we've had the confirmed Championship sort of sides for next season. What are your sort of thinkings on Charlton coming up rather than Leyton Orient? Do you think do you think that will be a continued rivalry maybe for Wrexham next season? It's had a nice bit of needle to it, didn't it, last season?
It did. It's. I think if I was looking hard-headed, I'd rather sort of Orient went up, because Charlton are a former Premier League club. You don't have to go to the Valley and see that. It's a wonderful stadium. I love going down there. Whereas Orient, obviously, funnily enough, they got relegated from the second division the same year as Wrexham, and they've never been back. Obviously, it's a smaller stadium. You'd have thought if they'd have gone up, their ambitions would be simply staying up. Whereas maybe Charlton will think, let's try and be mid-table and then push on in the future, a bit possibly like Wrexham. It's a great division. It's a tough division, but it's also a division that I can't see anyone dominating next season. There's no Leeds in it. There's no Burnley defence. Leicester, what's going to happen to them points-wise, we don't know. They're obviously the biggest club coming down. Southampton will be strong, but I don't see anybody dominating the thing. There's only 4 teams with parachute payments, which is a rarity in itself, because usually you can have 6 or 7, which makes such a big difference. If a team's got 44, 45, 46 million pounds extra revenue, then that particularly if it's the second year, because by then they've usually got the wage bill under control. So I do think it's ripe for a big surprise to actually go up. I'm not saying that's Wrexham, because that squad needs, I would say it needs 3 transfer windows to be, unless you're going to supercharge recruitment this summer. I think it needs 3 transfer windows to be a top-end Championship squad. But somebody will go up this season, a little bit like Ipswich did a couple of years ago, and surprise everybody. So who that's going to be, can't see it being Charlton. Can't see it being Wrexham, like I say, unless recruitment is supercharged. But somebody is going to come from the pack, definitely.
You're giving your take there, Sooty. You teased me saying there's room for a surprise, but like you said, not even really it is a reality check, but it's also just that is the nature of the Championship, and I don't think Wrexham will go in naive and undercooked for it from the football point of view, in the aspect that you've got Parky there. Parky's well aware of the work needs to be done. I know Rob and Ryan are giddy with excitement and see it as well. If we can get promoted, why wouldn't we give it a bloody good go? like you said there has to be a lot of change this summer. You've obviously done a piece on the Athletic this week. I urge everyone to check that out if they haven't already, saying that, Wrexham are aware of the business that needs to be done over the transfer window, and particularly as well that they might look more into the loan market
Yeah.
as well. That's one way to sort of bridge that gap, isn't it? You can get a Premier League quality player in without having to pay that initial sort of lump sum, maybe a loan fee, maybe subsidise some of the wages. But as you said, I think like Manor Solomon at Leeds this season was a massive impact. You had Anthony as well on loan at Burnley. So yeah, do you expect Wrexham to finally dip into the loan market? Because I think from a fan's perspective, it has been that one little criticism maybe that we've gone for the older profile players and people can be on the journey, but now we've reached one of the destinations. We maybe just need to take advantage of the market and let someone else's players do the work for us now.
Yeah, and it does work. Before I switched to the Wrexham beat, 4 years ago, I did Sheffield United, and they're not so much this season just gone, but previous promotion pushes were built around big loan signings. 2018-19 Dean Henderson, who I maintain is England's best goalkeeper. I really do. He's better than Jordan Pickford. Had a great cup final, obviously, got away with the VAR. But they went up because of him, because he made the difference. That he turned a point into 3 points. 2 or 3 years later, Morgan Gibbs-White, absolutely outstanding player. Took him got to the playoffs, couldn't quite get up. Then the year after that, James McAtee came along from Man City, and they got runners-up spot. So it makes a big difference. I think criticism is a harsh word to say that when you've won 3 promotions on the bounce, to say they've not used the loan market. But I get why they haven't, because there's different factors in play with it. Premier League players will not loan you a complete player if you're in Leagues 1 or 2, because they'll send them to the Championship. If you're McAtee or Gibbs-White or Dean Henderson, at that stage in their career, pointless being in League 1. They need to be in the Championship. So Wrexham would have been getting players that it's their job to properly develop, and time was of the essence for Wrexham. Wrexham's timetable was let's go up, let's go up, let's go up. You haven't got time to hang around to see if a player finds his feet for 2 or 3 months, because the bottom line is if you're coming into the Premier League loan, you've got to play. A Premier League team's not going to send you a loan player if he's just going to sit watching from the bench, because they can do that at their own club. So I get why they've not gone down that road, because the quality wasn't there. Obviously, some are. You look at Barry at Stockport, best player I've seen over the last couple of years, whether it was League 2 or League 1. But he got recalled in January and sent to Hull City. Well, it hasn't worked out because he got an injury. But that's the danger. We saw that with Arthur. We were all on tenterhooks that January, waiting for the deadline, the 21st of January to go by. So I get why they've not gone down it, but now the landscape's changed, and I'd certainly be looking at a good 2 or 3 players. If you get 2 or 3 crackers, that's part of your supercharging recruitment. Obviously, the free agent market will be the first one to go, as they've always done. And when I spoke to Phil, he'd spoke to I think 3 or 4 agents that day, about various players. Because obviously this is the time, or the last month has been the time, to be fair. Winning promotion when they did was superb, because it's given them an extra week, 2 weeks on any promoted clubs. But certainly on, Charlton now are only now looking at who they want next season, whereas Wrexham have had a month to sort people out and things like that. So, it's going to be interesting, and I'm not quite sure yet. The club have decided exactly what avenue they're going to go down. They've got a lot of headroom with financial fair play, but you don't want to do that all in one go. If you use up this 35-40 million headroom that they've got next season, if you don't go up straight away, you've got problems down the line. And let's face it, the squad is not as good as Birmingham's. Birmingham's squad that came out of League 1, to me, was top 8 ready anyway, and obviously they'll strengthen. I can, maybe they'll be that team I'm talking about who come through. It won't be a surprise to us because we've seen them, but people who don't watch League 1 football might be saying, "Oh, look at Birmingham," because they are strong. Their recruitment last season was excellent. It was very much like Wrexham's in the National League or League 2 in the fact that it was done with one eye on the following season, whereas I'd say Wrexham's recruitment last season was specifically done for last season. There'll be players. Sam Smith, I think, will do well. in the Championship. I think Arthur will, George Dobson, you'd expect to. Rathbone, as you know, he did well with Rotherham in a poor Rotherham team. But in terms of the not the players that you had coming out of the National League that you thought, well, they're top end League Two. So there's a lot of work to be done. But you know, as the last 3 summers have shown, they know what they're doing. So I think they'll be in good fettle come the start of the season. I really do believe that.
That's more the reassurance that we want. That's better. So we need more optimism, more positivity. None of this reality, none of this cold hard reality that's going to dawn on us soon.
Absolutely.
I guess the other factor as well, like I said, is the Premier League's only just finished this weekend, so retained lists should be out from them in the coming weeks as well. That might give us a better idea of some players who are available, and even players who might be available.
There's one thing I will say with loans that Wrexham will have to be patient as well. You know, it can often you'll certainly have Premier League managers will want their players around them for their tours.
Yeah,
we're talking end of July there because the Premier League doesn't start until 17th of August. But in my experience, they'll hold on to there's a very good chance you'll start the season without the loanees that you probably want. Gibbs White came in at United 2 or 3 days before. No, I think it might be 24 hours before the deadline. You know, it's rare for it to be sorted early. So as it's been in previous summers, it could be might need a bit of patience before we see. Certainly with the loanees, I certainly wouldn't expect to have too many. If they did sign 3, I wouldn't expect to have too many to go out to New Zealand and Australia, which I know is not ideal, but these players belong to somebody else, so it's up to them.
Yeah, of course, and it often takes the pre-season tour for the manager to make up his mind anyway on which youngsters will be involved, which ones won't be involved. So I guess the headline there is Wrexham's sort of biggest signings of the summer could be the last ones they do,
absolutely,
just before deadline day. Get someone in, and again by then we might have a clear idea of what positions Wrexham are lacking in for that championship campaign.
Can't stop listening to podcasts. Can't stop listening to podcasts. Can't stop listening to podcasts. Rob, Ryan, Redhead.
Another element there that you said was the free agents again. That has been sort of the bread and butter, the backbone of Wrexham's success. I know we get a lot of criticism for money spent, but it's actually wages where Wrexham maybe use their muscle more than transfer fees, and we saw that with Mullen joining, Elliot Lee joining, the likes of them. Again, this summer, there's been a lot of links already with some experienced names to the Premier League, and seeing Parky's track record at Wrexham, he quite likes someone who's got that experience, who's been there, who's done that. Again, like you said, maybe criticism is the wrong word to use for this, but I think from a supporter's point of view, every single season every summer basically, there's been cynics saying this transfer model doesn't work, it's got no sustainability to it. But every season it does work. Wrexham get promoted by the end of it. So I don't want to be saying, look, if Wrexham go and sign some 36, 37-year-olds from the Premier League, that's a bad tactic whatsoever, because it could work, and it has worked in the past. Do you think Wrexham will be in the market again for those sort of veterans who would be on decent wages, but come with the quirk that they are very experienced? They might not have the fitness to go twice a week, but they've got that unique sort of, like I said, experience really. They've been there and done it. Do you think the likes of, I think we've seen this week, Vardy, Aaron Creswell, you look at other players who've been released from Premier League clubs, do you think that is an avenue Wrexham will go down as well this summer, or do you think they've got to try and build a bit more long term now?
I'd imagine if anyone did come in that we'd class in the veteran sort of stage of the career, they'd be the icing on the cake type signing rather than 3 or 4. I say that because, and I thought it was the biggest success of last season was how the squad evolved. From the start of the season, there was 7 minimum, usually 8 National League team players in that squad. By the end, there was 2. And if you also look, like Rathbone didn't get a sniff first 2 or 3 months. Obviously, Sam Smith's come in. The average age just came down quite substantially across the season. Lewis Brunt started playing every week. If it's sort of gone unheeded, really. People haven't really spotted. And I thought that was the biggest success, because to do that, it's obviously the old guard got the club up in the top 2 or 3 within a month of the season starting, and it stayed there. But to actually evolve your squad like they did, and there was a lot of changes, a lot more than people think. By the end, even Longman coming in, there's the focus on Rodriguez because he's 33. But again, I think he was the icing on the cake signing in January to the younger lads in Longman's 24, 25. Smith, I think, was 26 or 27 now. So it has come down, and I would imagine that to keep going. Because when I spoke to Phil for the piece that we published today, I said, what's the difference? Championship, because obviously he's managing the Championship, kept Bolton up as a miracle, really, because they were under a transfer embargo. Short time at Hull, and a spell at Charlton as well. And he says the biggest difference is pace and power. And pace and power is not a 35, 36-year-old. So I took from that it will be, I'm not saying it's going to be full of 18 and 19-year-olds and then you're going to sell them for 5 million in 2 years' time. But I'm saying it's going to be, Duracell bunnies along the manner of Rathbone, because the energy of that guy and Dobson, it's going to be people who can get around the pitch with that class as well. So that's what I'm expecting. He didn't go into what signings he wants, but I'd asked the question, what is the difference? And he said pace and power is the big thing. So I just took from that, you're not going to get a Dad's Army type signings coming in. It's going to be, people who can do that because, like talked about Leeds last season, and obviously they were the standout side to me, but you had Dan James, Solomon on either wing coming at you. That's pace, that's power. You had Pirro through the middle, you had Aronson, Tanaka in midfield, absolute bargain they got from Dusseldorf. There was such athleticism through that side, and they were the exception. They were the champions, and that sort of thing. But if you want to get towards the top end, it's pace and power. Obviously, skill as well. You don't just want 3 Linford Christies coming in who can run here, there, and everywhere. You've got to have the thing. But that's why I'm saying that I wouldn't expect it to be a Dad's Army type recruitment. I could be wrong, but I read into that if you want pace and power, you're not signing, old. You're not signing a load of old players. I'd just say if you signed, look at the impact Fletcher made, look at the impact McLean made, and I say look at the impact Rodriguez made. I know he had his critics, and I listened to some absolute nonsense sometimes at games. We were at Blackpool in the away end, and there was some bloke near the thing who was shouting and bawling at Rodriguez, and I just thought, do you watch the game here? Because he did so much, and intelligent footballer. Obviously, and even he got the assist later on, but by then this guy disappeared. So I don't know if he cheered Rathbone's goal or not for the way it was set up, but I still think he made a big difference and to get that side over the line, and that's the sort of thing I'd expect if you're going to go for a former international like they've done with those 3. Then I would expect it'll be an icing on the cake, and the other signings will be pace, power, athleticism, and because that's what that team needs. We see that week on week, and certainly going to need it at this level because everything is so much quicker.
Not quite Dad's Army, and maybe not quite the young ones either. But
no, a happy medium between. Like I say, it did evolve. And I haven't worked out. I keep meaning to do it now. The average age changed, but it definitely did. By the end, it had come down. I'd say at least a couple of years, and I thought that's why they had more control in games. They were better in those final games. You look at Blackpool and Charlton, and I know Wigan didn't go to plan, but they never looked like conceding. It was such a disappointment because Wickham obviously won in the last minute, but they had so much more control, and I think, and that was also part of Matty James, another one of these veterans who came in, but it took him, I'd say, 3 months before we saw the best of him, and once we did, what a player, and yet when he came in,
the game showed that, didn't it?
Yeah,
but
the signing at the time, everyone's like, what we brought a guy in his 30s in for? But it was to get where they needed to go. They'll need to be able to keep the ball next season, that's for sure. I know possession isn't everything, and I think every game has shown that. Every big game over the last few weeks, whether it's the FA Cup final, Championship playoff final, possession isn't everything, but you do need to be able to control the ball and control games at times, and you need a bit of pace and power to do that.
Yeah, again, it'd be sort of consequentialism, wasn't it, this season? That was just getting over the line. It doesn't matter how you do it.
Horses for courses.
Maybe next season, it's going to be one where, again, the primary goal has to be next season to survive, but also be like you said, to then maybe stage a proper promotion bid in a couple of
I
years.
think build. My father said the door's open for somebody, but I'd be happy if Wrexham really built. And I think 3 transfer windows, which was obviously this summer, January, and then next summer, I'd expect Wrexham then, with the ambitions of the club and the income and everything that's coming in, I would then expect a proper promotion ready squad. Unless they want to supercharge it now, because I said last season, well, top 10 won't be bad, but they invested wisely in the summer, and then they really went for it in January. Sam Smith, Rodriguez, and Longman were big investments when you're a League One club, but that just shows the ambition of everybody.
Are there any positions in particular then that you think Wrexham do need to target for this summer? What positions do you think maybe are we most maybe undercooked in for the championship?
It's difficult. I'd love a central, because I presume it's going to be the back three again. A central defender who can pick a
Max
pass.
and Lewis front our side.
Yeah, Brunt and Cleworth either side, definitely. Brunt's getting there. He has these. I think he's a fantastic footballer, but then when he makes a mistake, he has a dodgy 20 minutes, and it's happened quite a few times last season. Max is Max. Max was brilliant last season. He learnt a lot as he went along. There were certain. I remember watching Lee Gregory for Mansfield back in November, and he pinned him that day. And I thought, but Max learnt so much from that. It was a clean sheet, 1-1-0. They ground it out. It's when Arthur did his wrist, of course. But I thought Max, that was probably the one striker who got the better of Max, I thought, over a game in that season, last season. But boy, did he come back, and he was ready, and he was brilliant. Absolutely superb, worthy player of the year. Though I'd have gone for Arthur, but I can see why Max got it. Like I say, Lewis Brunt, I think, fantastic footballer. I really do. Just, if he makes a mistake, he's just got to learn to forget it and just get on with it. Whereas I think he makes a mistake and then it's a wobble for 20 minutes. But I'd like them either side. But then you want somebody with pace, genuine pace, I think, in the middle, but who's great on the ball, which is a big ask. That's we're talking big money for those usually. Not as big as a striker, but they are for the way Wrexham play. That's absolutely key. So I'd love to see that sorted. Wing back, I think, is going to need strengthening. I think they all had the moments this season. Longman, I love the fact that he can do right and left, same way as Seb can. But he didn't. I spoke to Hull fans who were good friends of mine, and he didn't convince at Hull. So like I said, the Championship's a big step up. As happened last season, everyone deserves. I think
he's one of the most pertinent sort of examples, isn't he? That Hull survived on the final day.
Yeah.
They got rid of Longman, got Barry and Gelhardt in.
Yeah.
And that's the level you need just to survive.
Absolutely. It's a massive step up, But Longman's 12 months older as well, what I mean? And he finished his crossing was absolutely superb. I did. Obviously, Ryan Barnett got in the League One Team of the Year, but his form fell away a bit, I thought. Whether that was just because he had to play all the time, because that wing backs are the most demanding position the way Wrexham play, because you're expected to be in line with your strikers when you're attacking, and when the opposition got the ball, you've got to be back alongside your centre halves. So the energy, it's no coincidence that Phil often substitutes his wing backs after 65, 70 minutes, because you need those fresh legs. James McLean obviously got great experience. I'd certainly expect him to start the season. Whether he'll finish it, I'm not sure. Obviously, he's captain of the club, but the Championship's a demanding league. There's nobody fitter in that squad, but I spoke to James after the final game, and he said, I'm not as quick as I was, but I'm still as hungry as I was, and there's no denying that. But the quick thing was a very pertinent point. So I'd like to see wing backs a bit of strengthening, creativity in midfield, especially if they're going to persist with 3-5-1-1. Obviously, Rodriguez did a great job, I thought, in the final side of the season, but you go for a proper 10 playing off, which then allows Dobson and Rathbone, if they are going to play, allows them to get forward. That was the one thing that by Rodriguez dropping deep, it allowed those two with tremendous energy to get further forward. And it's no coincidence Rathbone got 8 goals, which is, I think, 3 or 4 more than he's ever managed in the league in his career. And that was because, I don't think he scored until, was it Exeter at home in November, something like that?
Yeah.
So his goals came after the change, because that's when Elliot Lee started playing a bit further, playing off Ollie Palmer. in the 3-5-1-1. So if they do persist with that, then they need somebody who can pick a pass in midfield. Because Ollie Rathbone, for all his energy, and he's great at getting in between the lines, he needs somebody to find him. So it's a little bit of creativity there. Like I say, centre of defence, wing backs, and I'd love to see Sam Smith given a proper go, as the lone striker, because he's fantastic at running the channels and things like that, and the way he holds it up, and he got 7 goals. In a team that doesn't create loads of chances. I'm not a XG devotee by anything. I use it obviously, and it's interesting, but Wrexham's expected goals at both ends would have put them about 9th or 10th if you look at that Opta table. Obviously, on the pitch is a different thing, and they've got a way of winning. But Smith deserves a chance. I'd love to see him at that level. He had a very brief taste earlier in his career, but he deserves a chance. And like I say, it's going to be. I'd favour evolution over revolution this summer, which would those 3 or 4 key positions, and then you build again in January, and you build again then in next summer, and take it from there. But I think if we could strengthen in those areas, they'll be championship ready.
Of course, we saw some tearful goodbyes of the retained list, didn't we? I don't think there was any real complaints of it. Obviously, Mark Howard and John Davis seemed certain to leave. Dolby was now going to sign a new deal. Fletcher was the one where it was head versus heart, maybe. I think we'd all love to have seen another season of what we've just seen of Stephen Fletcher, but we probably weren't going to see that at championship level. And I do think now we've been able to reflect on it, it was the right footballing decision. You can't have any sentiment. We've seen, of course, as well this week that Ben Tozer's retired from football after his season with Forest Green. There might be maybe some more farewells this summer. We'll get onto that maybe next question. But just on Tozer, Sooty, his impact at the club as well. And okay, he might not go down as a Wrexham legend.
I think he does.
Go down as
I think he does.
One of the greats.
Yeah, obviously we're not talking your Mickey Thomas or Joey Jones, but in terms of a modern day legend, I'd say if Ben Tozer, if he comes back in 10 years' time, does the half-time draw, if half-time draws are still a thing when you've been in the Premier League for 5 years, I'm not sure. But, it'd be a standing ovation from anybody who's followed Wrexham over the last, 3-4 years, because, captain's a huge position, and I know Luke Young was the club captain, but mainly Ben Tozer seemed to have the armband in that National League title season, and he really led by example. An absolutely superb figure. Shame he couldn't have got the promotion to cap his career. It'd have been great if Forest Green could have got up, because then you think, oh well, what a way to finish your career, 3 straight promotions. Didn't happen. It'd be interesting what he does next. I've not seen what his plans are. But oh no, definitely a modern day. But there's so many, Let's be truthful. There's so many modern day legends, but he definitely deserves his place. When Wrexham's modern day history is written, Ben Tozer deserves a prominent part of that.
I think they all will. The ones who finally got us out of the National League, and of course Tozer had these massive moments as well. I think he was massively underrated as an actual defender. I don't think he got the credit he deserved, because there was so much emphasis on the long throw, which was like having another 10 sort of free kicks or corners a game. There is still an unbridled excitement to when Ben Tozer went to get that towel, to launch a ball into the box, and there's been so many good Wrexham goals.
Especially if Aaron Hayden was in the middle. Middle, then you were thinking, this is it's like a FIFA cheat code, wasn't it? You just thought, there's a
It was
goal
like a glitch, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You should have been able to exploit, but Wrexham somehow found this this sort of loophole in the laws of the game or something. But what player? One of my favourite Tozer moments as well was Oldham away. An incredible finish that sets up that gets us the equaliser, and then we get the penalty. Luke Young wins it, Paul Mullen dispatches it. But Tozer's goal in the box, he does a little smart turn with his feet and then fires it into the other corner, and he's a very, very good footballer. And shout out to Ben Tozer. What a player, and what a part of the Wrexham story.
Very much so.
And yes, as we said, maybe some other goodbyes this summer. Do you think there's going to be some tough decisions that will have a lot of sentiment behind them, I suppose. But we saw that a lot of fan favourites weren't maybe getting an opportunity at League One level, and I can't see that suddenly changing now we've gone up a division.
Yeah, there's going to be. Like, Fletcher was the first one, really. You know what I mean? Numbers have to fit. They've got 27 contracted players now at Wrexham. There's only a 25-man squad because this season Seb and there's another one have gone from 20 to 21, so they now count as senior players. I can't remember the other one is now. Oh, Mo Fowl, sorry.
Yeah.
So making that fit, it's going to be hard. You don't have to do it until the transfer window shuts in the start of September. But that is going to be one of the biggest challenges this summer, making that fit, and that means that there are going to be good buys. I saw Ollie Palmer, interviewed at Wembley, and saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to fight for my shirt," and great, deserves that to be able to say that because, he's been instrumental as anybody to take them up the leagues as they've gone, and people shouldn't forget what he did last season. I did a piece around Christmas
There's
time.
an argument that Ollie Palmer has had the biggest impact of them all, season to season.
What?
Every single season he's been at the club, he has done
He
something
got,
huge.
last season, he got to Christmas, and I did a piece, and I went through the analysis. As much of his work, obviously in the opposition box, but how much of his work was on the edge of the box, and how much was in his own penalty area, in terms of being that first header away at every corner. He did so much for the team. And people say, yeah, but he only got 3 goals, and I know strikers are there to score goals, and he was the front man sort of thing. But, when playing off him, Jack Marriott was scoring goals. If Jack Marriott hadn't have broken his leg, maybe that partnership could have carried on. I don't know. The first half of the season, he was absolutely superb. And he deserved his contract. I know there's people now saying, oh, we're going to pay Ollie Palmer now, we'll have to pay him to leave, and that might be the case, but that boy deserved it. You know what I mean? He put so much in at the first half of the season, and without him, Wrexham wouldn't have been second in the league to then push on in January when they made the signings of the Smith, the Longman, the Rodriguez. Without Ollie Palmer leading the line like that doesn't happen, because as we saw at Stevenage in what was it, start of October, that game that nearly was postponed, Stephen Fletcher couldn't play that role, not for 90 minutes. He was bring him on, 20 minutes to go, the opposition defence, I won't say tiring, but they're a little bit more vulnerable. And it's magic, absolute magic. You look at what he did over Christmas. He kept it going then in terms of getting points and things like that. But Ollie Palmer did that for 4 months. So people who say, well, he shouldn't have got a contract, and you think, well, why? He did really well, and obviously, nobody can foresee that then. I think even at that stage when he got it in November, they probably hadn't. Well, I know they hadn't, because they hadn't had the meeting. They hadn't decided that they were going to go big in terms of spending on Sam Smith and Rodriguez, which changes the landscape completely. And obviously then Ollie can't get in the team, but he deserved that medal, runners-up medal, just as much as anybody in that squad for me. And there's a lot like that, but when you're on this rapid rise, they all have to go eventually. I've covered Hull City when they went from League Two to the Premier League, and there were some absolute stalwarts who obviously had long gone by the time we got to the Premier League, but they're still loved every much as the guys, as Dean Windass or whoever, who got them into the Premier League. You still had, there was a few who went all the way, Ian Ashby, Andy Dawson, a couple like that, but it's just, that's how life is. Stu Elliott gets 28 goals when they win promotion from League One, and then don't really get a look in the Championship, because the team's got to evolve, and that's going to happen. And there'll be a few, and it's going to be hard for the owners, because they've struck up a relationship with these guys. I've seen the pictures of Ryan Reynolds and Ollie Palmer. They're pals. Same with Mullin and the owners, and Ben Tozer and the owners, and Ben Foster and the owners, and Stephen Fletcher and the owners. But 3 of them have already gone, and the others will follow as well. But they've all played the part. I say, I'll go back to it again. When the Wrexham story is finally written, when they're sat in the Premier League, and that Premier League story is written, these guys will rightly be hailed as absolute heroes. But it's only natural that they fall by the wayside on the way through.
Yeah. I think Parky said that himself, hasn't he? That even that National League promotion, it's got to be tough to even top that. I know maybe
Yeah,
a Premier League
yeah,
promotion would be the next level, but for so many Wrexham fans, that National League promotion felt so much better than the last two we've had,
yeah.
which might sound very ungrateful, but it was that
It's
pure
right.
release of emotion of something that felt so impossible for so long that we'd given up on this dream, and those were the guys who finally did it. And again, if you look back to that first season, I think it's very easy to forget how much the football changed when Ollie Palmer signed
Yeah,
in that January,
yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
before then it just wasn't
He was
clicking
he was the
whatsoever.
final, obviously the final piece of the jigsaw, because obviously other additions came. But in terms of making everything click, certainly up front,
Mm.
Paul Mullin then blossomed
And there,
with him.
there was a lot of animosity towards Parky at that point in time. You can't
Yeah,
forget that either. I'd been on lots of away days, spoken to a lot of fans who were saying, "Get rid of him." Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not working. We can't play a sort of football. But then
the
as soon
first
as you
series,
get
of the documentary even had an episode,
well,
"Sack the
so
Gaffer?" question mark. So
yeah,
that shows what the mood was. And obviously they get beat. They get beat on the opening day next season. I'm sure there'll be, people will be shouting and bawling like they are. But that time could come as well. Phil Parkinson, who's got 3 promotions in a row, and to me deserves at least 2 cracks at it. But that might not happen, because that's football. He might be fall by the wayside as well. But that won't then denigrate in any way what he's achieved. Hopefully, he's the man that takes him to the Premier League. And he's never had money before in the Championship, not proper money. And he built his time at Hull, that I covered from my old paper, the Yorkshire Post, only lasted 4 or 5 months. And he went because it just wasn't working. There was a strong dressing room, and it just didn't work out. Yet signings he made, Sam Ricketts of this parish, he brought in Michael Turner.
we'll have to
They were
censor
then
that.
central figures in the following season's promotion to the Premier League. So if he does get the money, he could do it. But at some stage, he will no longer be Wrexham manager, because that's just how football is. So, we've all been in football long enough, and certainly these guys in the team now will have played for 5 or 6 teams. Nothing lasts forever. But,
Yeah.
enjoy it and be thankful that it did while it was going on.
Yeah, it's a bloody good reality check this week's podcast, isn't it? We have brought the mood down from last week's
Told you,
extravaganza.
after the
So,
Lord Mayor's show, you're always sweeping up all sorts, aren't you? So here we are.
well, so I did want to ask you that as one of our final questions. Really, is because as a Wrexham fan, I am very much torn at this moment in time. I know that if Wrexham finish just above the relegation zone on goal difference next season, it's been a bloody successful season, given what has happened. To survive in the Championship would be incredible, and that still has to be, for me, that has to be your main objective before you can start dreaming of building upon that. But then when you speak to the owners, you hear the giddiness, you hear the excitement, the fact that Rob doesn't know what consolidation is. He had to look it up in a dictionary. And we've got this momentum, and we know this from covering sport, that for me, one of the biggest differentials is just in your head.
Yeah.
If you have that self-belief, that confidence, which this dressing room does, it's very hard to pick that up again once it's gone. There's an argument that, look, while you've got this not open field next season, but like I said, maybe not a standout team in the Championship, and while you've got this momentum, this could be the best time to capitalise. But you can't run before you can walk in the Championship. You really need to take it steady. What do you think right now, as of today, before summer signings? We obviously will presume they're going to happen. What do you think Wrexham's genuine target will be for next season? Because as you've said before, last season the target wasn't promotion till maybe November when they reevaluated. What do you think Wrexham's sort of sensible outlook will be for next season?
Sitting here now and mentioning momentum, like you've mentioned there, 14th. And I say that because that will be the club's highest ever position in their history, going way, way back, forever. You know what I mean? If to everyone else around the country, they'd be like 14, so what? But to Wrexham, it's another stepping stone to where they are going to end up. They are going to end up in the Premier League. Been adamant about that now for a good year. And I think if Wrexham can turn around end of next season and say, yeah, we finished 14th, 13th, whatever, that's that's success, because no other Wrexham team has finished as high as that. Achieve that, and if you are finishing 13th, 12th, 14th, then you've got a decent squad. And that's when I say that is when the push comes next summer to build that squad that can then be top 6 And if you can be top 6 in the Championship, you can be top 2 because it's a very, very competitive division. So I would say, obviously staying up would be great, and I think that would be a great achievement. But I think in terms of milestones, and we're used to having milestones now, but if we could be sat here and you've had the owners on last week in a year's time, and now I'm on again clearing up after them, and if we can all say Wrexham have never been higher in their history, then I still think your momentum is still moving there because you've achieved something. And if you do that, then you really push on with the momentum. Also, we could be sat in every year and they're in the Premier League. Brilliant. It's going to take a big overhaul. But if they could get that highest ever finish, I do think that would be a worthy stepping stone and something for everyone to celebrate and take into the summer, and that, to actually say to prospective signings, we're ready now. We're going to have a real go. Do you want to join us?
Yeah, best finish in 160 years. That's not bad for consolidation, is
Absolutely.
it?
That's what I mean. Whereas you finish 18th, 19th, you've stayed up. It's great. Brilliant achievement.
Yeah, and that would be what
but if you
top 3 league finishes of all time as well.
Yeah.
There is next season's got to be so historic, whatever happens. Yeah. I suppose as well, Sooty, what I did maybe want to end on in terms of sort of people bloody love transfers with fans. But, last 3-4 seasons, we've been very easy to sell as a club, haven't we? Yeah. How different do you think that'll be this season coming up, where we aren't the big fish anymore? The other teams have these bespoke training centres. They might not have the relationship between the squad and the owners. They might not have the feel-good factor we've got. But for maybe players who are deciding their next move after being in the Premier League, do you think Wrexham can match what some of the bigger teams can offer?
I know for a fact, having spoken to players, agents, existing players who've come in the last year, and they'll talk about their fellow professionals at previous clubs. So many want to sign for Wrexham. It's the place to be at the moment, and it's surprised Premier League talent that's come in, Premier League level players who've come in over the last 12, 18 months. They've told me, not when you're doing an interview, when you're chatting, and they've said, so many want to come here, they're all saying, what's it like? Because people can see something happening. Nobody's ever gone 3 back to back to back. Nobody's ever done it before. And people, I think, now are realising with the Allen family on board, and I'm certain they'll be similar. I'd say the 2 or 3 similar type investors. I've always said the owners will retain 51%. Always thought that ever since the non-league days. But I think there'll be other tranches of the club will be sold off, so people can see there's going to be the backing there, the financial muscle to get into the Premier League. So yeah, the training ground needs sorting. It really does. Because it's not ideal, and you can only muck in for so long, make a thing of it. Well, we're overcoming this. If you're trying to get a kid down from the Premier League who's trained at Manchester City for the last 10 years in facilities that you can only dream of in the EFL, then to say to them, oh yeah, you don't mind just jumping in Bob Smith's car, and we'll drive 3 miles down the road and we'll come back. They're going to look at you like, well, what are you going on about? That was outdated. I covered Bradford City when they got in the Premier League, and they had the same. They changed at Valley Parade and then drove to a rented training ground, sort of 4 miles across Bradford, and then they'd come back. So I'd be waiting in the car park, and you'd see them, and they'd be dripping in mud, getting out of these, what the posh Castle footballers in 1999. Obviously, it's moved on a bit now, so that needs sorting, but it's outweighed by the excitement of being involved with a club. And you only had to look, testimony of people who leave. Stephen Fletcher's the perfect case in point. He said in that statement when he left, he says, I've fallen out of love with football, but these 2 years have been the best 2 years I've had in my career. This is a guy who's had however many years in the Premier League. He's played for Scotland. He's played all. He's played at the very, very top. And for him to say that about playing in League 2 and League 1 with Wrexham, oh, people want to come. People want to come here. They really do, because that's it. It's the place to be.
That's the positivity we needed to end this podcast on. Sooty, thank you as always. And yeah, year's time after another promotion.
Yeah. Whenever you've got a blank week, basically, you've had the big hitters, and I'll make sure I'm around the week after I've seen you've had a good couple of guests on.
That sounds good to us. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Take care.
Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. As always, please do leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here. It's the best way to give back to the channel. Thank you very much to Sooty for joining us, giving giving us his time and his thoughts ahead of the new season. We'll probably get him on again over the summer as we preview the Championship campaign and hopefully reflect on some signings sooner or later as well. And yeah, thank you very much for continued support. Thank you to Red 10 People Development for their sponsorship of the show. And thank you to Hypnotic for the music that stings. Take care, and we'll see you again next time.
The Wrexham AFC podcast with Nathan Salt and Rich Faye.